And there we are back. We have a nice clean cutting board. We are ready to prep our risotto. So we have this beautiful rice grains, carnaroli risotto, one of my favorite types of risotto rice. There's several variants of risotto rice, but one of my favorites is always carnaroli because it just has the tendency to hold a bite a little bit better than, let's say, its counterpart arborio or other types. Here we go. Butter. Our recipe, 150 gram risotto rice. I use 10% butter for any recipe of risotto. So there's 15 grams of butter in there. And that is ready for gentle sweating. Now we want to be gentle when we are sauteing these onions. We want to bring up the temperature, we're going to melt the butter, we're going to have the onions swim in there. But we don't want to add any color. We don't really want to burn the butter or the onions. They just need to be softened up a little bit until they're translucent almost. Gently cook them over a medium heat. We're going to be adding the rice grains. We're going to stir them in well. And then we're going to be adding little bits of chicken stock, bit by bit, to cook it till that it's almost cooked to perfection. Low heat, starting to bubble. I'm turning down the fire a little bit, making sure that these onions are cooking slowly, evenly, making sure they don't burn or do not change color. Because you're going to see it later on in the risotto. Once it's cooked in the rice, you're going to see all this little bit of burned onion, which is really not nice. We want to make sure that this is done gently. Now these are cooked, we'll be adding our risotto rice and stir that in nicely. We're going to have to heat that grain really nice and nice through. It needs to have a little bit of heat to release those starches. Make sure that it's going to absorb all of that stock afterwards and all that flavor. Going to put in a pinch of seasoning. Just already, so these rice grains already get the flavor enhancement. Gentle stirring, wooden spoon. We don't want to break the rice grains, but we do want to move them. The more you move the rice grains, the more it will release the starches, and that is what is in the end going to give that beautiful sauce around the risotto. And sometimes you get a risotto and it's kind of just grains swimming in a liquid. That is not what we want. That is not risotto. No, a beautiful risotto is moved all the time. It's made sure that you add chicken stock or other type of stock little bit by little bit, and what it does is it makes friction on the rice grains, and these rice grains are rubbing off starch every time you move it. That's all going to be absorbed in the sauce and going to bring this risotto to absolute perfection. So the rice grains are really nicely coated, nice and hot, did not change color. Gonna add a tiny bit of stock. So I have a larger amount of stock ready because I want to make sure that I can make that risotto creamy. Rice will keep absorbing moist until it is completely mush. And what we want to prevent obviously is that from happening, but we do want to have enough stock to always make sure that it is nice and creamy. That by the time we are serving, those rice grains are swimming in this beautiful sauce. So we're adding just a little bit at a time so we can build up friction to make sure that all that starch is rubbing off from the rice grains, cooking them nice and evenly, adding tiny bits of stock at a time, stirring gently. So then we'll do a beautiful seasonal asparagus, and we'll grate the Parmesan. I'll use the box grater, but any grater will do, doesn't really matter. We want to make sure that we have enough. Parmesan is yummy, gives a saltiness to the dish. Very important to keep in mind, Parmesan obviously has quite a bit of salt in it. It is a really well-aged cheese, and we don't want to be adding too much salt to our risotto initially, because it's the Parmesan that is really going to give it that flavor kick in the end, and it's going to give it the saltiness that it needs. We need a touch of seasoning, but not much. Lovely, our asparagus. In the meantime, we make sure that the risotto is stirred occasionally, not cooking too fierce. Some dark bits, they tend to be really tough, really want to cut them off. Some go a bit up higher than the others. You kind of have to see it individually for each asparagus, making sure that we only use the best, the most beautiful and most delicious bits. One more stir. You can already see the sauce forming around here, and that's really what I'm trying to talk about when you want to build up the resistance, you want to release those starches. It needs to be a little bit like that. You don't want to put all the stock at once because the grains won't be rubbing against each other. They won't release the starch. You won't get that beautiful sauce around your risotto that we're so after. It has to reduce all together with the butter and the rice grains, adding a little bit at a time. Adding a little bit at a time. Some tales say you're only allowed to stir one time. Not sure who really believes in that. I'm not a firm believer of that. For me, you can stir left, right, center, in eights, crisscross. Do it as you please. Time for a few knife skills. Always glad to show you how the things are done. I have been banging on it already a few times, but you keep your fingertips in, put them on top, and make long motions with your knife. Try to cut as evenly as possible without putting any pressure. We don't want to push down, we don't want to use force, we want to use the knife, we want to use the length of the blade to make beautiful long strokes. Always the same motion, always minding your fingers. I cut my fingers maybe once a week, twice a week on a bad week. So if it does happen, don't be alarmed. I think every chef has tortured fingers and tortured hands from the times I didn't pay attention. Anyhow, with practice you do get better, it goes easier. There we are, these are our asparagus. Now asparagus, they don't need much cooking. We want to add them to the risotto just before finishing. They need maybe 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and we're not there yet. We do see it's getting thicker and thicker. You see it's really having a nice sauce. It's already hanging around the rice grain. Oh, these grains are starting to cook really perfectly actually. You can see now that the rice grains are swelling up a little bit. I think we're about 60% of the cooking. We're gonna wanna add in our asparagus, give it a 2-minute cook, and then our base for the risotto is done, ready to finish with the Parmesan and a little bit more stock just before serving. The risotto is an easy dish. There's not many ingredients, there's a few, but you have to make sure that you do the things correctly. You have to make sure that you take the timings right, you take the time to really move those rice grains around. You want to really make sure that you get that sauce in the end. If you don't have the sauce, the risotto is not going to be a success. It's not going to be the way it's intended. But this is cooking beautifully together. The asparagus are in now. We'll only need another minute or two. Little drop of chicken stock. We'll be adding Parmesan cheese. Loads of it. There it is, you can really see the sauce forming. It's because we move the rice grains constantly. All those starches have unleashed, and now together with the Parmesan is going to bind it all together to this gorgeous sauce. Delicious. Want to taste for the seasoning? Make sure we're at the right spot. With the Parmesan is really lifting this up all the way until exactly where we need it. We didn't need to add any salt. It was the Parmesan that really seasoned this dish, really made it up to the rice grains beautifully cooked. It's runny. You can see it is running off the spoon, but there's a really nice thick sauce there. I'll leave it the rest for a little bit. The rice is going to absorb a bit of sauce. The consistency is going to be perfect. Just want to move that risotto a tiny bit more. Here I really can feel the consistency coming together. If you're too quick, the sauce is going to form on the outside of the rice grains. Once you plate it up, you're going to see it, and that's not what we want. We want to stir this a little bit more, release a little bit more of the starches. Bind it together with the Parmesan. And that's it. And spoon the risotto into the plate.